I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. You know, in our busy, fast-paced lives, we rarely slow down long enough to pursue some of those things we love. And instead, we go in different directions and tell ourselves that we'll get to the good stuff someday. Well, we know one woman who made the conscious decision to turn someday into today. Is the high-powered Executive Vice President and Editorial Director of Martha Stewart Living, Margaret Roach had it all. A successful, high-profile career that she loved, a big paycheck, and a fast-paced life in New York City. But she knew that something was missing. She found herself countering the stress of her job by gardening like crazy on the weekends at her country farmhouse and then racing back to the city every Monday morning. Finally, she traded in her high heels for garden boots and simply walked away from her corporate life for a simple, more rural life as a writer. Now she has a new career as a mentor and inspiration to a huge audience of like-minded gardeners. Through her many books, lectures, podcasts, garden tours, and website, A Way to Garden, Margaret shares the landscape she's created, as well as life's lessons she picks up along the way.
I started as a copy girl, and then you get to be an editor and so on and so forth. Eventually I found myself managing 180 people, going to meetings all day long, and not being able to express my own personal creativity. There was no more time for writing or anything, or going on photo shoots even. And it was really, really stressful. The city was stressful, managing everyone was stressful, being in charge was stressful, and I knew I had to go. And so that was really the genesis of my exodus for my career. You know, I found that the thing I was saying most frequently to people when they were inviting me to do something I wanted to do, I was saying, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. And I was delaying and deferring everything because of work. And another thing I noticed is that I was feeling more and more estranged from nature. You know, I was dozens of stories high in a skyscraper every day for many, many hours, not on terra firma. And it just didn't make any sense. I was just separated from the things that I wanted to do, which was to write and to garden. You know, I phrase my philosophy as horticultural how-to and woo-woo. And to me that means the two layers of what you can get out of the garden. The literal harvest, the juicy tomato, the blooming flowers, or the deeper layer of what you can get, which is the part I like the best. The connection to nature, the lessons that I see unfolding, the bigger life lessons, the much deeper life lessons. The garden teaches me things like loss of control, to surrender, because after all, we're not in charge, you know. Forces bigger than us are at work out in the backyard. To let go, to start over when it's time to start over, patience. Gardening is really nothing more than a patience-building practice. So even if that's the only deeper lesson you ever get, I think that's a good one. I think garden and gardener, we're one organism. And for me, it's always been like that, that line in the Jerry Maguire movie where he finally gives in to her and he says, "You complete me." You know, and that's how I am with the garden. That's how I've always been with the garden. And again, it's like yoga. It's like a moving meditation. You know, it just feels spiritual to me and emotional to me. And we grow together. We learn from each other. If I take good care of the garden, it takes good care of me in return. It's a reciprocal, intimate, lifelong relationship. So again, we're like this.
Margaret, this has been a work in process for you, coming up on nearly 3 decades.
Don't tell them that.
Well, the truth is the truth, and the results are fantastic. They're spectacular.
Thank you.
But the question is, you know, where do you even begin on something like this? I mean, you were faced with that at one point.
Yes, and by instinct, not because I read it in a book, I did the right thing, which is Garden Design 101. If you want to plan where your garden belongs on your property, go inside and look out the window. Pick spots for your garden on axis from where you would view it, because if you're from indoors out, because if you're a real gardener, when you're outside, you're not lying in a chaise saying, oh, look at my beautiful garden. You are weeding and crawling around and mowing and so forth. So where you view your garden is from out the kitchen window, from where you make your tea in the morning, out the bathroom window. If you brush your teeth and you can see out the window, where you should site a winter garden is on axis from that favorite chair that you sit in by the fireplace. Not in the back 40 where you're going to have to tromp through snow to get to it. So that's what's really important, to site gardens for use every season and enjoyment every season, to make a 365-day garden.
And taking the seasons, more than one, to
Yes.
come up with that design, because things change.
Absolutely, and to put the things, again, the way that you use your house. And the other thing I would say is that the front walk, for instance, is a much traveled spot.
Yeah.
You're going to see it every day
Yep.
if you go in and out. So for goodness sake, don't have that be some messy area. Give that the most attention of all. So the views you see from inside and the views you see getting to and from the house are your most critical parts of your design, I think, that
Yeah.
hold it together.
Margaret, on the subject of design, I can tell that you have several tricks up your sleeve, like the repetition of pattern, because you do so much with this gold throughout your garden.
Oh, so you noticed.
Of course, it's great.
I may have overdone it a little and I may need to edit. It's been a lot of years that I've been using it. But it's a really inexpensive, easy way to create axes, to really draw the eye out across the garden to a focal point. So if you if you can't afford, or your kind of property isn't suitable for a 100-foot-long pergola or some other architectural element like that, you can use gold foliage to create that alley or that axis. You know, some deliberate stops along the way, along that path, to a giant moment of gold at the end. And you can use gold conifers, gold shrubs and trees of deciduous nature, gold perennials. So it's really, for me, it's the way that I move the eye through the garden, and especially looking out the window, I love seeing that. You know, the bouncing, the moments of gold.
Yeah, and it's good also to just be deliberate with it too. You don't just want to kind of put
No,
one.
and that's really a great point, because with variegated foliage, with gold foliage, even with dark purplish foliage, if you just have one moment of it somewhere, it's like, oh, what's that about?
miss it.
And repeating it anchors the whole thing and really makes it look intentional. And so I think that makes it better design.
So deliberate is key.
Deliberate is key.
There's a lot to be said for visiting a well-designed landscape, because there's pretty much a teachable moment at every turn. And Margaret's garden is no exception to that. Like these water features, for example. She has several on the property, and she loves the sound that the water makes and the frogs that live here and the sound that they make. But there's even a bigger reason. Besides the visual appeal, water is essential to all forms of life, so it helps the animals and the beneficials that live here, and it does a lot for attracting more to it. So you're adding to the diversity of the landscape and to the animals that live here. Now, a common question with water features: what about the mosquitoes? Well, in Margaret's case, it's not a problem. First of all, the water is moving. Secondly, she's a completely organic gardener, so she has a very healthy food chain. So between the frogs and the beneficial insects, the mosquito larvae and eggs don't have a chance. Even in her water features where the water isn't moving, the surface is covered with plants like this duckweed here. So that cuts down on the population of mosquitoes being able to lay eggs on the water's surface. But if you feel like you need to do something, you can get a product called Dunks. That's the common name. It's a bacterium known as BT. Now it's organic, it's considered safe for your wildlife and your fish. You place it into the water and it should keep your mosquito problems at bay. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people that are really into their gardens that aren't such big fans of lawns. But you seem to have a good balance of both, and you use it in your design too.
Well, I have a little more than 2 acres to contend with, and lawn is an inexpensive, fairly low maintenance way to tie together all the other beds and all the other garden features. So it's serviceable.
Yep.
I don't have a perfect lawn. It's not all fancy lawn grasses. It's whatever's basically growing. I do pull out the worst weeds that I don't want. I dig out a lot of dandelions and so forth. I don't use any chemicals ever. I don't use fertilizers. I don't feel it needs it. It's just going to cause me to have to mow more. And I don't need that.
Yeah, I think you missed a spot over here, by the way.
Well, I did, and that was intentional. You're supposed to know that that was intentional.
I do. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, this year I just decided that I wanted to try a little bit of a contrast thing visually. And also, I don't know if you can hear that it sounds different here than it sounded down below where there's more mown grass.
Really?
That we have a whole little ecosystem going on who's taking advantage of this community of plants, little blue stem grass and a lot of other sort of wildy, weedy things that have grown in naturally. What I love is this sort of sensual amoebic shape that I've carved that then takes you from mown lawn as you look up the hill from in the house or the backyard, medium, and then the ornamental grasses, the miscanthus, standing behind it. So it's 3 forms of a grass thing playing off one another. So it's kind of fun. I may be mowing more patterns into the place. You never know.
Now, with over 2 acres of property, and it's pretty much just you maintaining it, it's amazing that I don't see more weeds than I do, and you don't appear to have a pest problem.
Right.
And I know you're not a chemical person.
I do have pest problems like every gardener, and I do have a lot of weeds, but I do have some help a couple days a week. I have a friend who comes and helps, so that's great. But we are old-fashioned and we're both organic gardeners. So we don't use any chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, but instead we really keep after things. And I always say to people at lectures that I give and so forth, you want to have a garden, you've got to make a pass through every bed every week. If you do that and get them when they're little, you don't have mile-long weeds, right? Or 5-foot-tall weeds. And of course, sometimes it gets away from me. Yeah. And we have to go play catch-up. But yeah, if I were to use chemicals, I would be sterilizing the soil, killing off soil life. And for me, growing plants isn't growing plants, it's growing soil, right? It's feeding soil and growing soil and loving soil, because the soil is the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
You know, with that Harvard biologist, D.O. Wilson, he says, he calls all the creatures that live in the soil, the nematodes, fungi, bacterium, etc. He calls them the little things that run the world. Wow. And he says, even he doesn't know what they all do, but he knows we'd be dead without them.
Whoa.
So how can you like dump stuff on your soil?
Feed the soil and let the soil feed the plants.
Pull the weeds.
And pull the weeds.
And squish the bugs.
Margaret, one of the many things I love about your garden is the sense of unity that you get when you walk through it. And I know that one of the ways that you do that quite frequently is with the color combinations that you pick.
Right. And how those colors then tie back to the biggest color element in the landscape, which is usually our house and the paint colors we choose. Right. So my house is olive, dark olive with orange trim. Kind of kooky.
Love it.
But I can anchor it with being inspired to sort of use red and green-ish things inspired by, here's where my color combinations come from. I mean, look at this Little Brother Montgomery fancy leaf begonia.
Yes.
And look at the colors there, and look at how nature says, hey, but it's also okay to have wine, or one of its relatives, another fancy leaf begonia, Marmaduke, chartreuse and reddish, right? I mean, amazing, so that's okay. Or maybe a more olivey green, and maroon. So even in a single leaf, or this phormium, I mean, look, it's like olive and pink.
Wow.
If you like that, right?
And what a surprise, it matches your house.
Right, exactly, it does. Or in a single leaf again, a coleus leaf, orange and sort of red. But then look, the surprise is when you turn it over, purple goes with those too.
Wow.
So look, if you like red, white, and blue, have a red, white, and blue garden. Don't let anyone, including your neighbors, tell you that's not good. And if you like pastels only or only white and silver, go for it.
Yeah.
I like a lot of color. I have a high color tolerance. I love a lot of color, and especially reds and greens and permutations of those, as I said. So it's all sort of Christmas in my in my landscape and at my house, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's your garden. You can do what you want.
It's my garden, exactly. You know the rules.
Right. As an organic gardener, all of the nutrients and soil amendments that Margaret puts into her garden beds comes from her compost pile. And you know me, I'd be remiss if I didn't come check out somebody's compost. And I'm glad I did in this case, because I wanted to show you this system here. It's called a windrow, and it's nothing more than a long row of all of the material breaking down on its own, without any supplemental turning or irrigation. It's just exposed to the elements, so whatever water it gets comes from the rain, and then the air just comes in from the sides and the exposed surfaces. But it works just as well, it just takes a little bit longer. But it also works very well for Margaret because it's just her and her helper, so they don't have the time or the energy to come in here every week and turn it. But that's okay, because let me show you how good this looks underneath all this raw material. So again, imagine the raw material comes in throughout the season, it goes on top like this, what's underneath breaks down, and look at what's underneath. Let me move some of this away for you. Look how beautiful this is. I mean, that is gorgeous. There's worms in there. And see, that's how you get great looking gardens and healthy garden beds. So at the end of the season or in the fall, what hasn't fully broken down, she'll take this and move it to a designated area further down, and it works well for her, and it can work just as well for you. Sometimes I think one of the best lessons we can take from gardening is to do what Margaret does and simply slow down to appreciate the natural world, especially the one in our own backyard. If you'd like more information about what you saw today, including links to Margaret's blogs or how to get her books, or maybe even watch this episode again, well, we have all of that on our website under the show notes for this episode. And that address is the same as our name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World.
Look at him, he's about to turn into a cobra. Oh, he's got his rattle going. Oh no! Joe. Ow! You got bit! He's gonna get bit!
Stop. Here, Carl, come look at this thing. Ow!
Oh!
Ah!
I got it! Fight him again!
I'm gonna let him go.
I don't like snakes.